right back into it. Okay. All right, we're back. We're back. Like I said, we just had some couple technical difficulties. Y'all know how that stuff goes with technology and it's cold outside. So, big bro, once again, talk to us about your first sermon.
Yeah, my first sermon, I won't ever forget it. I came out of Isaiah chapter 1, verse 1 through 6, and I talked about a street Christian.
Okay.
And it was, the message was really based around my life experiences up to that point, and how that we had some of those similar issues even in the church during that time. And it was amazing that my pastor uh, was impressed with my message.
Okay.
But our district moderator came that night to give his support. And something he said to me that night, he said, "You'll learn, young preacher, never to bite the hand of those that's going to support you."
Wow.
And I really didn't understand where he was coming from. And so, just to show you the lack of spiritual maturity that I had, of self control, my pastor leaned over to me quickly and said, "Don't say anything because he is your elder. We'll
Mm.
talk about it later." Because for me, I believe preaching is about us being real. And so, for him to make that statement made me feel at the time as if, okay, certain lines you don't cross, anything that's going to impact those who sit in the pulpit with you. So I didn't really, that night I really didn't know how to take it. But after having a conversation with my pastor, I learned from that point that anytime you preach the truth, you're always gonna ruffle some feathers.
Right. And once again, like I said, we're on with my big brother, Pastor Roscoe D. Robey from the 7th Avenue Missionary Baptist Church. And Pastor Robey has told us about him being in the military, also about his preaching experience. So then help us then, because, when you're a young preacher and you hear people encourage you and say you did a great job, but then a seasoned pastor comes and basically in a way may cut you or may challenge you. How do we not take that so personal?
That's a good question, and it takes me back to when I was in the military. I was stationed in Erlangen, Germany, and I was a member of the Erlangen National Baptist Church, and I sat under the pastor, Dr. Clarence D. Hill. And every time that I preached, he would tell me, the church would come to me and say, "Minister, you did a great job," and and I'd say, "Okay," but I learned that until I heard from the voice,
Yes, sir.
that what they said really didn't matter because, and he would always say, "Son, you did good, but when he dissect the message, this particular time he say, well, you didn't give enough meat. You gave a whole
Mm-hmm.
lot of vegetables, but you didn't give enough meat. Or the
Mm.
next time you gave too much meat and you didn't give
Right.
enough of this." And then he even told me once, he said, "Good meat will make its own gravy.
Right.
So you don't have to try to make the gravy." And probably I preached under him for 2 years before that I came back stateside, my wife and I. It was the very last sermon that I preached in Germany that he stood on his feet and pushed me and supported me.
Wow.
And he told me that day, he said, "Now you're ready, and you're ready to pastor, son. And anywhere you
Mm.
go, I don't have to worry about you because I know now that you have learned how to balance and give the church a well balanced diet in
Wow.
preaching." And so I would say to young preachers, don't take the criticism as that, but take it as constructive.
Yes, sir.
Because if seasoned pastors really care about young preachers, they're going to pull them aside and share with them areas that they can improve on. Now,
Yes.
it's like me. I have a young son who sits under me, and the unique thing about him is he's very observant, he's very attentive, um, and I've only had to share a few things with him. Um, but a lot of it has to do with how well we observe those that we're under. Um, and I'm very open with him. I've even shared with him on Sundays when he would say, "Pastor, you really preach a great message." And I said, "Well, I'm glad. I thank you for saying that, but I missed here, here, and here, where that I should have given more information, more insight here and here, because every preaching moment should be a teaching moment,
Hmm.
uh, both in the pulpit and out of the pulpit, because we should be able to learn something. Now, some preachers may say it's arrogant, but I don't think it's arrogant. Um, what I preached this past Sunday, some point this week, I'm going to listen to it because it's important for me to be able to see errors that I need to improve on, or areas that I could have given more information or could have given a better example. That's how we grow. I've been
Right.
preaching 31 years, and I am still thriving to become an even better pastor because I don't see myself as arrived yet. I feel that there's still a lot that I can do, and as long as I feel that way, then I feel I can be a benefit to young preachers because how can I help a young preacher continue to develop if I'm not willing to continue to develop?
Wow. My goodness, that's very important, Big Bro. I'm glad you hit on that. So you talked to us earlier about your background being from Franklin, Kentucky, about your conversion experience. You were converted at a teenage age, even though you said Big Bro said he felt the call at 8 to be converted. So let me ask you this question then. As we talk about preaching, as we talk about the landscape of preaching, as you've hit this on for us, when we're talking about growth, what are keys then to staying fresh in preaching?
Keys to staying fresh in preaching um, is we ought to always be reading.
Right.
And when I say reading, I'm not saying we should set aside devotional time and meditation time in the Word, but we should always be expanding our horizon by reading.
Yes, sir.
Um, Now, for me, I when I first started out in ministry, uh, I went to school briefly at what used to be called Simmons Bible College
Yeah.
in Louisville, Kentucky, but now it's known as Simmons College of Kentucky under
Right.
the leadership of Dr. Kevin Cosby. When I went to school, there was a strictly Bible college under Dr. Hodge. I went there briefly. Then I went to Hopkinsville College of the Bible briefly. Um, and I found that for some reason that it just wasn't, I don't want to say it wasn't fulfilling, but it wasn't what I felt I needed and what I was looking for. And so
Mm-hmm.
the weird thing is, little bro, and you may get some hater mail behind this. Um, it wasn't until I came to Columbus, 2009, and I started. And by the way, when I was in Kentucky at First Baptist Gospel, I was bivocational.
Okay.
So I was a juvenile detention supervisor by day and pastoring by night.
Wow.
When I came to Columbus, that was when I got my first taste of full time ministry,
Yes, sir.
and that's when I realized how much more that I needed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I checked out several schools and went through the process of understanding what they had to offer. And so I went to Ohio Christian University is where I ended up. Um, and so I started all over. I started all the way back at undergrad. And so I got my associate's degree in 2014, um, pastoral leadership and Christian ministry. Then I received my bachelor's degree uh, at in 2016, and my bachelor's degree was in pastoral leadership with a minor in Christian ministry.
Okay.
And in 2019, I finished up with my master's. I got a dual master's degree
Yes, sir.
I have a master in ministry and a master in business administration. And I say that because it was a culture challenge
Right.
at Ohio Christian. Um,
Yes, sir.
that school actually helped me to really find who I am
Mm.
and who it is God wants me to be in ministry. And it also helped me to broaden my horizon. So, not only do I read material from Black authors, you know, um, but I also have read leadership
Right.
books from guys like Atkins. Um, and so reading enhanced my thinking.
Yes, sir.
So that when I go into sermon preparation, now I really look at that who, what, when, why, and where
Mm.
from a whole different perspective.
Yes, sir.
Because it's important to me to to analyze and dissect the text
Right.
even before that I begin sermon preparation.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely.
and so I encourage young preachers to get out of the entertainment business. And
Hmm.
what I mean by that, there's nothing wrong with a hoop.
Right.
So don't get it twisted. Every once in a while, I feel one and it comes on.
Right.
But I think it's more important for us to feed the sheep
Right.
than it is to shout the sheep.
Mm.
Because what has happened is we're finding out that many of our sheep are rebellious because they're not being entertained.
Wow.
Now, this
Wow.
this pandemic has been a blessing, I believe, for Seventh Avenue,
Yes, sir.
and here's why: I've been able to do something that otherwise I may not would have been able to do.
Hmm.
That is, I heard one of your guests talk about uh, really pushing discipleship and pushing love. And what I have been doing since the pandemic started, I've been teaching on a series uh, over a year now, knowing God.
Yes, sir.
And currently, we're talking about knowing God requires a dedicated commitment. And we've been working John chapter 15, verse 1 through 10 for the past 3 weeks.
Yes, sir.
Because for me, the reality is there has to be a greater intimacy
Mm.
between us and God.
Yes, sir.
And the response and the feedback that I have been receiving has been phenomenal.
Yes,
Uh,
sir.
many have talked about, Pastor, I never thought of it this way. I never saw it from this perspective. And now I'm starting to understand. Because there has to be transparency between us and God.
Yes, sir.
Because for a long time, I used to say, well, God knows my heart. He does know my heart, but he also need me to put some activity, some action into the relationship.
Wow. My, my, my. My, my, my. Oh, wow. Now that's wow. That's heavy. I just want to let you know that is heavy right there. So as we talk about this pandemic, you talk about preaching. So could you say that your preaching has either taken on a different level, your study has taken on a different level, or encourage us about the importance of making sure, because we're living in a day and time where everybody can easily access a sermon. It's, they're on Facebook, they're on Twitter, they're on YouTube, they're on Instagram. So it is important to be fresh. It's important to make sure that you really spent time with this text. So then talk to us and help us and encourage us about the seriousness of preparation, your preparation process, but also about the importance of making sure we're getting the text correct.
Well, I think the importance of getting the text correct. Now, what I do, it's on Sunday after I deliver my message,
Yes, sir.
where a lot of my colleagues probably rest on Sunday evening. When I'm done preaching, Sunday evening, God and me are already in connection, in commune to discuss and to talk about what's coming next.
Right.
Uh, what I have found, and I'm not ashamed to say it, between the two churches I've been pastoring a little over 26 years, and what I have found in these last 4 years is series preaching
Yes, sir.
really helps. First of all, it benefits me because in a series, I already know where God is moving me the next week. And if for some reason I don't cover things in a way that they need to be covered this week, I can always be able to incorporate that into next week's message because I'm preaching a series.
Yes, sir.
Um, and in the series preaching, uh, it's a continuous preparational process. It gives me more time to work with the who, what, when, where, and why. Give you a great example. Um, I preached a series um, before that I got sick, and I preached it out of the same chapter
Hmm.
for 4 weeks
Wow.
because God kept showing me more and more and more.
Right.
And really to be truthful with you, we can't really be integrous to a text by just preaching it this Sunday and then moving on. Because I
Hmm.
used to be one of those guys. I preach out of John this Sunday. Next Sunday I may be over in 2 Corinthians. Next week I may be over here. But now I've learned as I season preach series because the people get more from it
Mm-hmm.
when I preach a series than they do when I jump around.
Right.
Now I've been teaching on knowing God, and over the last 3 weeks I've been teaching about knowing God requires a dedicated commitment. My sermons on Sunday have been a follow-up to what I was teaching on Wednesday.
Yes, sir.
Because here's the reality: everybody who needs to get Wednesday is not going to get Wednesday because they're not a Wednesday participant.
Wow.
But if you
Wow.
come back on Sunday,
Mm.
then they get a glimpse
Mm.
of what you're dealing with on Wednesday,
Hmm.
and draw some of them to come to Wednesday.
Wow.
Because on Sunday when they hear it from a preaching standpoint, it goes a lot more. It goes a little bit more intense, but it helps them to understand even on a greater level.
My goodness. My goodness.
Because my preaching has changed with the pandemic. Because number one, I have more time with God because I don't have the distractions of a lot of community stuff. Secondly,
Mm.
it's been a blessing because my home office has become my office.
Yes, sir.
Because some say, well, I do better at preparation at my church office. I do better at my home office because when folk know you at the church office, even though they may not come in because of this pandemic, your phone rings. And every time that you get into a thought, you get distracted.
Mm.
In the home office, it's just me and God.
Wow.
Um, and so for me, this has really enlightened me and showed me how to get to an even greater level of preaching. But watch this. I share with you that I had gotten really sick. Uh, Last couple of years, I've really struggled with sickness, but during this pandemic, I've really been sick. And I know that there were points when my folk thought Pastor got COVID, but I didn't have COVID. But it was interesting because a couple of weeks ago, I preached a sermon titled the benefits of thorns.
Mm.
2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 6 through 12. Because God revealed to me that what I was going through was preparation for an elevation.
Wow.
Sometimes we have to go through some pain and have to go through some suffering in order to appreciate the promotion.
Mm.
And so instead of me getting into that place of woe is me and feeling like that life was over because I was so sick, and I don't know any pastor, especially a pastor that loves to preach and teach, that would enjoy, watch this, being sick from September to December. I didn't preach from the last Sunday in August. The next time I preached was the last Sunday in the year of 2020.
Mm.
Did you hear what I just said?
Yes, sir.
My associate, my son in the ministry, delivered the mail from September until the last, before the last week of December. That was tough for me, but I was so sick, I couldn't catch my breath. But in the midst of that, what God was doing some stuff, because since the last Sunday in December, I've learned a whole new way to preach and be effective, reaching the people and not exhausting myself.
Wow. My goodness. That wow, that's a testimony. Not only about your sickness, but that God has showed you something. It's amazing how the Lord will put us in those positions where he has to sit us down to really show us, but he does it, and then we become better for it afterwards. Especially if you talked about with your church as well. So, talk to us about um your first church. You say you're bivocational. How did you get called to your first assignment?
It's interesting that you say that. Um, one of the gentlemen that they had as a pastor, um, when when I grew up, my parents, um, and his family and one of my uncles, we used to go camping together every year.
Okay.
So he was like Uncle George,
Okay.
and I'll never forget it. We went, uh, my home church went and did what would turn out to be his last pastoral anniversary,
Mm.
because he got sick, and he passed away shortly after that. And it was funny when we went there. I told my pastor, when he and I were alone. Pastor Allison had went out to get worship started, and I said, Pastor, the feeling that I'm feeling now, I don't like that I'm feeling. He said, What are you feeling? I said, the Spirit is telling me that I'm going to be the next pastor of this church. I said, but Uncle George is a pastor. And it was weird because 3 months later, he passed. And they listened to 7, 8 different preachers. And in January of '95, my pastor come to me, and he's, no, the last Sunday in the year, he came to me in '94, and he said, son, listen, I'm going to send you to First Baptist Scottsville next month, the start of the year, to help them until they decide what they want to do. He said it'd be a good opportunity for you to get some experience at preaching every Sunday, and teaching Bible study. He said, I know it's an hour and a half drive for you because you're in the military, but it'll be a good experience. I said, okay. So I went there the first Sunday in January, my wife and I never went back to my home church. I preached for them the whole month of January and preached for them the first 2 Sundays in February. And the AME church that they do fellowship with, the pastor just stood up and told him, he said, y'all had this young man here for 6 weeks preaching. Now, if y'all don't call him, then y'all don't deserve another pastor. Because
Mm.
God is obviously showing y'all something because you keep bringing them back.
Wow.
And so that next Sunday, after Sunday school, they said we have some unfinished business. So my wife and I, we got up to go back in the back. They said, no, y'all are unfinished business.
Wow.
They said, we don't know if we can afford it or not, but we want to call you as our next pastor. And here I am, 24 years old, and I'm like, wow. But there was no hesitation. I accepted the call. And I told them, I said, look, uh, we'll just go with the flow and see what God does and what God sees. And it turned out to be 14 years and 7 months. Now, in that 14 years and 7 months, it was some growing pains. Because after about 6 months, I said, look, we need to do some things to enhance the worship. And they said, well, what are you thinking about? I changed. Now, you hear me. And I guarantee you, there's some pastors that may look at this or may be viewing this that will laugh and they will tell you it's true. I changed one thing, Pastor Brown, on the order of service.
Mm.
And you would have thought that I had created created mutiny. I had a member to get upset and say, you have messed up our order of service. And I said, no, I've enhanced your order of service because that's what I'm supposed to do.
Yes,
That
sir.
was that was the first crisis. The second crisis was they were they always wanted to have their Christmas Eve. They wanted to have a Christmas program on Christmas Eve. I was fine with that when it was just me and my wife. But then when we had a little girl, I told her, look, Christmas Eve, I'd really like to go and do that with her family and my family because Christmas Day we want to be home.
Right.
Guess what the response was?
Oh Lord.
Well, Pastor, we've done this for 40 years. And if you don't want to come for the Christmas program on Christmas Eve, you don't have to. But we're not going to change this.
Wow.
Now, as a young pastor, I could have easily followed my first mind, which would have been to fight. And I want to say this to any young pastor who's been pastoring less than a year or 2 years, pick your battles wisely.
Mm.
And understand this. Some may disagree, but it's the truth. You really don't become pastor the day that you're installed.
Mm.
My first church, I was there 7.5 years before they accepted me as pastor. To that point, I was just a preacher. Now, Pastor Brown, here in my current assignment, many of them called me pastor, but I didn't really become pastor until 11 years.
Wow.
Because each church is different, and then you have to understand what you are coming into in your assignment.
Yes, sir.
Because there's such a thing as church hurt, and when folk get wounded, it takes them a while to lower those barriers and trust.
Mm.
And that's why we as pastors have to be integrous.
Yes, sir.
If we say something, we need to do our very best to live up to it.
Yes,
For
sir.
example, whatever I'm preaching, I need to live up to it.
Yes, sir.
And that's where my wife is a blessing to me, because my wife holds me accountable.
Yes, sir.
Honey, you preaching this, but are you really living?
Wow. My goodness.
Because she's the one. I don't care if the whole church, if they turn somersaults and shout and 100 folk come to Jesus that Sunday. If something is not like it ought to be, she gonna come to me and she gonna say, honey, I love you. And so I gotta be truthful with you. Even though you got the response you got, it wasn't happening.
Mm.
And this is why.
Wow.
And that's what I love about her. Because she keeps me balanced.
My goodness.
She don't mind telling me you flopped. She's only told me that twice in 29 years of marriage. And
So
notice
then,
what I just said. 29 years of marriage.
my goodness. So tell us then, before we get to Seventh Avenue, you just talked about you and your wife's relationship. Talk to us then about the importance of that accountability and the importance of making sure that you and your spouse are not just spouse, but that you're best friends, that you can talk to each other. Talk to us about that.
Well, I'll say this. It was difficult for me in the beginning because I had a major ego.
Hmm.
And it was hard for me to hear anything other than you done a great job.
Right.
And my wife, Vanessa, she's a very quiet person, but when she has something to say, she says it. And it was a many Sundays that we would travel back down the highway from our first church because we lived 35 miles from the city where I pastored, and that's a long time to ride. And to have somebody, just be honest with you and be upfront. She would tell me, "Do you want me to say what you want me to say, or do you want me to tell you the truth?" And I said, "Well, just tell me the truth, even if it's gonna make me mad." And she would tell me, "I could tell you really didn't study like you normally do. You
Mm.
didn't apply yourself to the preaching of your text like you usually do." And there was a few occasions where she said, "Look, today I just felt like you were showcasing. You were just trying to shout them, but you weren't willing
Wow.
to feed them."
Wow. Wow. Wow.
And that was tough
Wow.
to hear. It was tough to hear. Uh, Amen, Brother Caldwell.
That's my
Uh,
that's my that's my big brother, Pastor Bill Caldwell from St. Jude in Oklahoma City.
but I needed to hear that
My
because
goodness.
what it did is it has made me to some degree it's made me the preacher that I am today.
Yes, sir.
Um, and the other part about her, she doesn't try to walk out in front of me. She walks beside
Mm.
me, and her goal has always been to preserve. Watch this, preserve my reputation and integrity. And if that means that she has to be harsh and remind me, then that's what she does. Because I used to have this thought process. I'm pastor, so I should be able to do A, B, C, D with no issue. But then she would always say, "Look, some things you need to think through how you handle." Now, let me say this to you, Pastor Brian. You're a young pastor. You're in your 20s, right?
I'm 30.
You're 30. Now, I'm going to share something with you that I learned the hard way. When it comes to counseling, um, when I counsel young women, if I don't have my church clerk who is in her twilight, she's seasoned. If I don't have her with me, or if First Lady is not in her office, watch this. Her office is next door to my office.
Yes, sir.
I don't do it. And the reason is there was a situation where I did not, my views weren't aligned with certain ones in the church. And so they asked to speak to me, but they were actually setting me up
Mm.
to say that I had done something inappropriate
Oh Lord.
so that they could hold me hostage.
Yeah.
And she happened to be in the building. Now watch this. I asked the individual, "Why are you shutting the door?" My wife, it's like the Holy Spirit just moved in her because she was doing some technology stuff in the building. She came down, she put her key in my office door, unlocked the door, come in my office, and she went into a room in my office just to make the point, "I'm here, so whatever you had in mind, It ain't gonna happen.
My.
Your wife is not just your best friend. She's not just someone that you talk to at home, but she is also your protector
Yeah.
because she can see what you can't see.
Mm. Lord have mercy. Whoo. Oh Lord, you helping us tonight. I just want to let you know you blessing us tonight because that's so important to have that. And my goodness, you can stay there for a minute. You got anything else to add to that?
I'll just say this: many great preachers in my generation have been ruined over that very issue.
Wow.
Great preachers, but now they have no power.
Mm, my Lord. My goodness. Oh Lord. I'm trying to segue, but that was a word you just shared with us. No lie, big bro. That was a word that you just shared with us. So then talk to us after your first church. How did Seventh Avenue come about?
It was it was unique because I had the Lord was working on me, allowing me to know that He was getting ready to move me. And I prayed about it, and I had a conversation with my wife. I said, honey, I said, the Lord is pulling on me, and I feel that soon He's going to reassign me. And she said to me, she smiled. She said, I've been having dreams, and she said, I already knew, but I was waiting for God to speak to you.
Mm,
And
mm, mm.
and she told me, she said, we're going to the Midwest.
Lord have mercy.
And here's the unique thing. One day I was on the internet at home in Kentucky, and this is no lie. I just typed in the number 7 and put a th at the end of it because I was looking for something. Seventh Avenue Community Missionary Baptist Church came up, and so I just looked at it, and then I had a link to their district, and I saw that the church was vacant, and I began to pray, and I said, "Okay, God, is this what you're saying to me?" And it was like 3 months prayed about it, and then of course I sent the information that they were asking candidates for, and it was probably 2 months. I said, well, they done called somebody, or I didn't make, I wasn't with. And then one evening, I was sitting there in my den, and the phone rang. I looked down. I said, I don't recognize that area code. I said, it's Ohio area code. So I answered the phone, and they said, good evening, Pastor. This is the pulpit committee from Seventh Avenue. As you can see, we still are in the search, and obviously we're interested in you, or we wouldn't be calling. And from that point, they kind of walked me through the next steps. Um, and then they invited us to come for me to preach. And Pastor Brown, here's how God moves, because it was crazy. We spent the night in Louisville, Kentucky, with some of our friends the night before we went up, and and then when when we started the next morning to the rest of the way into Columbus. Here's the unique thing that happened. My SUV broke down 60 miles out of Columbus.
Oh Lord.
And we sat there for a couple of hours and finally got AAA to come and get us. And it pulled us into behind the building of the church. And so we had to leave the vehicle there. They picked us up and took us to the hotel. And the next day I spoke with the deacons. I said, look, I got to find somebody to fix my vehicle because it's broke down. They said, just leave it sitting here. It'll be all right. So it took me 3 weeks to find a mechanic to fix it. And I called them, and they said, Pastor, it's fine. It ain't hurt nothing sitting right here. Now, it was sitting in the pastor spot for 3 weeks. The gentleman who fixed my vehicle, his wife was a member of 7th Avenue, and I didn't know it.
Lord have mercy.
So he picked my vehicle up, he worked on it, and he called me at work. He said, Pastor, your vehicle is fixed. I said, okay, well, let me make some arrangements so that my wife and I can come and get it. He said, don't be in no hurry. He said, it'll be all right here at my shop. He said, you ain't heard this from me, but they're going to call you and invite you to come back. So just wait till then to pick it up. So when we went back,
my gosh,
I preached, we drove back, and after a while, I said, well, it was a great experience. I got off work one Saturday afternoon and was outside, received a phone call. My wife said, hey, it's Columbus. I said, tell them I'll call them back. She said, no, you don't want them to call you back. She said, this is the pulpit committee. They want to talk to you. And they said, Pastor, we had our church meeting today, and the church voted to call you as our next pastor.
Lord have mercy.
And I froze for a moment, and I'll never forget it. The late Mother Chaver said, baby, are you still there? We just offered you the church. Are you going to come?
Lord have mercy.
And I said, yes, ma'am. And here's something that I did. Because of the relationship that I had with my first church, and because I wasn't leaving under bad terms, I sat down with them when I made a decision to candidate with the church, and told them that I was going to go to Columbus to preach at a church that I was candidating. I said, I have to move because God is leading me to move. They didn't like it, but they accepted it. Now, when the call came, I told my current church, I said, look, I need to give them 6 to 8 weeks before that I come. You can't come in. No, I need to give them that respect because I've been with them 14 years and some months. And when I told the church, they said, Pastor, that's fine. But if you decide in that time frame that you don't want to go, then we just keep rolling. Now, Pastor Brown, how many churches do you know when their pastor and his family is getting ready to leave, that they treat his last Sunday with them like it's his anniversary?
Lord have mercy.
They were sad. They were sad, but they were celebrating with me because they said you were a man and you did this the right way.
My.
Now, because I did it the right way, I was able to come into 7th Avenue the right way. And as a result of that, it built a level of integrity because I'll never forget what they said to me in the interview. Well, if we were to call your existing pastorate right now and ask them where you are, what would they tell us?
Wow.
I said, I'll give you every one of them's phone number, and you can call them and they'll tell you our pastor is in Columbus this weekend preaching at the church he's candidating in.
Wow.
And at that point, half the committee had no further questions to ask me.
Wow.
Because I just believe that ministry is all about integrity. How can I expect God to bless me if I'm not willing to be an integrous servant?
Wow. Oh my Lord. Oh my goodness. Like I say, oh my goodness. I'm at a loss of words. Like this whole conversation is just, oh my gosh, from the wife to the churches to now. This is wow. This is amazing. Like you're really helping and blessing me And I know you're blessing those who are watching. This is big bro, this is unbelievable. So then you've been at 7th Avenue for how many years?
11.
So in those 11 years, and then let me segue to this. You talk about integrity, and the way you just talked about integrity, it's amazing the way you just hit on that. Because how, as a pastor, somebody may be watching this and say and feel that tug, it's time to go. I'm ready to go. God is moving me to go. But I still have this church. And they've been, because I believe pastors find it hard to leave a church that has been good to them. And you just show with your integrity, talking about 14 years of your last Sunday, they still treated like it was an anniversary. So from your experience, what are advice keys in transitioning yourself from one church to another, transitioning your family from one church to another, and transitioning your church? Basically, letting your church know, I love you, but God is leading me somewhere. Transitioning them to get them even ready for the next person.
Good question. And what happened is my preaching, my preaching seasoned and matured to another level in that last year and a half that I was at my first church. And here was the unique part of it. I didn't even know in the beginning that I was preaching and teaching to prepare them for transition, because God had not yet said it to me. But some of the members saw it before that it was confirmed.
Wow.
Um, and I'll say this: there's phases when you start to feel
Mm-hmm.
that your time is growing short.
Yes,
At
sir.
your Be careful that that doesn't come because of frustration.
Oh, yes. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Um, because when God begins to show you that there's a move about to be made, it's not a quick, instantaneous move, because God has to prepare you for the transition. Now, watch this. When God showed me that my season was coming to a close at First Baptist, I literally went into a season of depression,
Mm.
because I grieved the fact that I was about to leave people who I had served and God had blessed me to pour into for over 14 years. My concern was, are they going to be all right?
Wow.
Because they're about to have a season shepherdless.
Wow.
Then my next concern would have been my family, but my wife was ready for the transition, because God had been preparing her before he even began preparing me. It was easy for our daughter, because our daughter was only 5, getting ready to be 6 years old.
Right.
So it wasn't like I was pulling her away from friends. So it was an easy transition there. Um, but the other part of that was wondering, okay, I've seen them where I'm going on Sunday. I've seen the shout. I've seen the worship. But God, what is it? What is this move going to mean for me? Because I'm going from a rural church now to urban. And I want to say this very candidly. Just because that we're just simply transitioning from one church to the next, it's more than that. The culture is different. See, at First Baptist, they were just looking for a good preacher and teacher. But when I got to Seventh Avenue, they're looking for a pastor who can preach, who can teach, who can lead. Because now I took on the role of administrator. In my first church, they didn't come to me and ask me or talk to me about ABCD, wanting my opinion, or saying, Pastor, how do you feel about this? So can you imagine walking into a full-time ministry and being asked those kind of questions that you're not prepared for?
Mm.
And that's where favor comes in, because God knew that the preaching and the teaching part, I would be okay with, even though I quickly realized that now I'm preaching to folk with master's degrees and PhDs. So they're expecting more than a squaw. Okay. But now I need that nurture to really help me to understand the concept of the business side of ministry, how to continuously improve ministries, how to uh, teach and present to the body that uh, there needs to be some changes. And as I heard one of your people say, um, that you interviewed, he said the word change is a bad word, and it is. You don't use that word. So my question to God was, God, how do I get them to transition from this season to the next season? And here's how you do it. You teach. God showed me you teach the people to where you're trying to take them. Because if you teach them there, then you don't even feel any resistance. It's a smooth transition because they can see it, because you're giving it to them through the word. And so what I have learned in these 26 years of pastoring is when God shows me something, I begin to teach the people. Because if I teach them and they can understand, they can receive it, then the process is smooth. When I hear guys talk about, man, I'm struggling to get the people to see this, they're struggling because you haven't given them biblical application as to the effectiveness of why we're doing this.
My goodness. Like I said, you are you really helping me tonight in so many ways. Pastor Craig Friendly, another big brother of mine from First Baptist Church Hicks Edition, and Spencer said the same thing. Teaching is a must. So then, let me ask you this question: um, Talk to us about the importance of pastoring, but taking care of yourself physically, spiritually, and mentally by like removing distractions, removing things that aren't good for you.
I can say that in a couple of words, but I'm going to take my time. But I'm going to first say this: stop trying to be everything for everybody.
Mm.
Um, we bleed just like those we lead.
Mm-hmm.
Let me say that again. We bleed
Yeah.
like those we lead.
Mm.
Um, because there's been this persona that uh, pastors don't have emotions, and the reality is pastors do have emotions. In 2018, I did the most funerals that I've ever done in my ministry
My,
here
my, my.
in Columbus. And the last one that I did, I cried like a baby before I could ever open my mouth. And the church sat in awe. And here's what I said to them. I said, this brother that's laying here, I love him. He's like a brother to me. And I said, and what you all need to understand is every time I lose a sheep out of this congregation, a part of me dies with them.
Wow. Wow.
Because when you are a shepherd and you have a shepherd's heart,
Lord have mercy.
it should impact you when things happen, such as loss. Um, Pastor here in this city, Bishop Washington. Now watch this. Last year we was in the heat of this pandemic. He did well over 60 funerals from March to December. And he finally had spiritually, it finally took its toll on him. And he said to me, son, I don't know how much more of this
I
I
can tell
can
you.
do. And I told him, I said, Dad, here's the key. You can't be everything to everybody. Sometimes you got to be willing to let someone else help you in bearing that burden. My sickness taught me this. I can rip and run. I can take care of everybody else and neglect myself. And what good? And what good is that? I've been married to the same woman for 29 years. And every time I get ill, she takes care of me. Every time she gets ill, I take care of her. But what she said to me this last time, she said, who's going to be there to take care of your daughter, be her father,
Woo.
if you don't take care of
Woo.
you? And here's something that I observed. My son in the ministry, he kept feeding the flock because he understood his assignment was to preach. But God showed me. He said, see how things keep moving,
Wow.
even in your absence. Even though the people say it's not the same as hearing you, but life goes on.
Lord have mercy.
And so what we as pastors have to do is we have to learn to take care of ourselves. Get physicals every year. Set aside some time in the year where you just take some time. Because here's the argument. Well, I can't afford to take no time, Doc, because the church is going to be the church, whether we are there in person or whether we're on our sick bed or whether they come and look down on us. And so what we have to do is understand this. If mentally I'm messed up, I can't be effective. If emotionally I'm drained, I can't be effective. If I'm sick, I can't be effective. So I have to make time for me. So how do I do that? Every morning I wake up at 6 o'clock, partly because I have to do maintenance for my health issues. But I spend from 6 to 8. That's me and God. I don't pray for no one or anything but me. That's my time to have Him show me and refuel me. Later on in the day is the time that I spend in intercessory where that I pray for my congregation, pray for their needs. But if I don't seek my own needs, How can I be effective in seeking God to help them? How can I be effective in my preparation to feed them if I'm malnourished?
Lord have mercy. Mm.
You know, and I'll say this too, Pastor Brown, and it's good to call you Pastor Brown because when I met you, you was a minister, and I
Mm-hmm.
told you then there's something special about you. And so when you told me that you had been called to a church, I was excited for you. But I want to hit something that I heard someone else say that's been on your conversation. Find a circle in your generation. And watch this. Hear what I'm about to tell you. Find some folks that you can connect with that understand your generation. But make sure, make sure that there is also some folk in your circle who are seasoned, who know more and have been through more than you have. When I was a young preacher, young pastor, I was excited about going to the association, my home association. I pastored in my own association, my first church. I was excited to go to the association that year because I was pastor. And here was the unique question that was posed to me. They served lunch after the morning sessions, and they served dinner before the evening sessions. Here I am, 24 years old, and I'm sitting and listening to pastors who've been doing this thing for 40, 50, 60 years. And they asked, why are you sitting here with us and not over there with your generation? And I said to them, my generation can't tell me anything because they don't know anything. Secondly, you've been through where I got to go through.
Mm.
And so if I can sit and learn from you, I can avoid some of those pains
My
because I
goodness.
already know how to navigate it. Now, here was the interesting thing. Most of those seasoned senior pastors, patriarchs that I was sitting and listening to, most of them didn't have an eighth grade education, but they were anointed. And the things that they shared have stuck with me. And can you imagine when I came here to Columbus? I was 40 years old when I became pastor of this church. And some of the members said to be so young, you have an old seasoned spirit. They said you remind us so much of our late pastor that died a few years ago. And when we close our eyes on Sunday morning and you're preaching, it's almost like we're hearing him. Now, some would take that the wrong way. I took it as a compliment because it showed me that I was being what God needed me to be in that season and in that moment. And we can only be as effective as we're willing to open ourselves up to God. And that's why I told you when you shared with me that you had been called. And you said, well, big brother, how do I do this? How do I do that? When I came to Columbus 11 and a half years ago, the committee asked me, what changes will you make when you arrive? And I said, how can I come in and make changes when I don't know the church? I said, I will give 12 months to watch, learn, and observe, preach and teach, get to know you and you get to know me before changes come. And here's what happened. Then 7, 8 months of being here, things were changing, but they didn't see it because God was leading it and teaching it.
Mm.
And so
Wow.
God made the shifts. He made the transitions. I didn't have to do it. All I did was just teach them so that they could be guided in the direction that God wanted the body of Christ to go.
Wow. My goodness. My goodness. Woo! Lord, like I said, you bless us tonight. I want to acknowledge my big brother, Reverend Antoine Richardson, Pastor Antoine Richardson from Zion Baptist Church in Hartford, Connecticut, as well. Oh my goodness, this conversation has been amazing. So then I got let me segue to this before we get ready to close. So then, what's on your heart as we talked about earlier before we got cut off with the young preachers and young pastors, and what advice do you have for young preachers and young pastors?
Well, let me say this. Let me start with young preachers. Young preachers need to submit to pastoral authority. You're not going to always agree with your pastor, but you don't have to, because there's only one pastor of church. And if you submit to your pastor, God will open up some gateways that otherwise would not be open. But I want to say this: He will close some opportunities if you dishonor your spiritual father. Now, Dr. Carl Edward Whitfield Sr. of the 11th Street Missionary Baptist Church in Bowling Green, Kentucky, is my pastor. He's my spiritual father. And I respect him and honor him. And that's why God has blessed me the way he has, because I learned to honor him, because I don't have to always like what he says, but I honor him because he's my spiritual father. Here in Columbus, I have a covering, and I honor him because he persists in telling me to honor my pastor back home. But he also holds me accountable here, because there's some things here that he knows that I need to know. And so we have that kind of relationship. It's great when you can have two fathers and respect them both, but at different levels. Now, what I'll say to young pastors: every how do I want to say this? Every Elisha needs an Elijah,
Mm.
and every Joshua needs a Moses. Just because you're pastoring, and I want you to get this: just because you're pastoring, and you may be the senior pastor of the church that God has put you in, but just because you're the senior pastor there, it doesn't make you a senior pastor in the city.
Wow. Oh Lord.
Every young pastor needs a seasoned pastor. Here in Columbus, Bishop Washington is my Moses. And when he speaks, I listen. And what we have to do as young pastors is we have to be willing to listen to those that have walked before us. Now here it is. Bishop oftentimes tells me, son, you in the same you're really in the same group with us. You've been in ministry 31 years. You've been pastoring 26. And he says, I've been in pastoral ministry about 39 years. So really we caught us. No, we're not. No, you're my senior. See, because I need that leadership, because
Yes,
that
sir.
leadership is what makes me better. And so I guess what I'm saying is, in order for us to be effective pastors and to strive to be great pastors, we have to be willing to be pastored.
Yes, sir.
And if we can do that, we can succeed.
Yes,
Because
sir.
when you get in trouble, who are you going to be looking to help you get out of it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. My goodness. My goodness, big bro, you like I said, you helping us. My big bro, Pastor Antoine Richardson, he had this question. It says, going back to changes, what do you feel is the best approach to make changes as a new pastor after the appropriate time has passed?
Great question. And here's what I'll say: the Holy Spirit will reveal to you when the appropriate time is for you to do that. Because sometimes we allow our time to become God's time, and it needs to be the other way around. It needs to be God's time and not our time. We think it needs to happen now because now seems to be the right moment, but we need to make sure that God has confirmed that this is the right time. Because if you move too quick, then you have no covering.
Mm, wow. Like I said, big bro, this conversation has been phenomenal. And I let me just say this to those who are watching. Big Pastor Robey, big bro, he gives me this type of advice all the time because I'm always seeking him for some advice. And he's told me about these things, about covering, about teaching. He said even they may not like it at first, but you got to keep teaching. So as we get ready to close, what else is on your heart that you want to share with us?
I want to say this: that there's going to be a season in your life as a pastor where you're going to feel alienated, you're going to feel betrayed, you're going to feel stabbed in the back. Because when you are doing exactly what it is God wants you to do in that season, you don't necessarily always offend or upset the body of Christ that God has planted you in. Sometimes those that you affect with your commitment and your submission to God is those who are supposed to be your so-called friends. Now, when I heard this a few years ago, I didn't want to accept it, but I do now. Sometimes a pastor's worst enemy can be another pastor because they hate on you because you're seemingly where they want to be and can't be. And that's where we have to keep our focus and recognize and remember that we are called of God to serve God and not to be men pleasers. Now, I'll say this: friendship circle here where I am, and I've been here 11 and a half years. My circle is very small. When I say very small, it's single digits. And that's because God has showed me that I need to keep it small because of what he's doing. But in that circle, I got uh, I've got folk that I have looked up to and admire that have 40 years of pastoral experience, 30 years of pastoral experience, and then there's some that have less pastoral time than I do. So I'm in a position where that I can be a blessing to someone in the circle, but I've got folk in the circle that are stretching me because they know what I desire to know. So be careful who you let in your circle, and be careful who you call friend, because ministry can be a lonely thing when you figure out that everybody who calls you friend ain't friend. Matter of fact, just today, my covering here in Columbus, he said, "Son, remember this one word, frenemy." Remember that, Pastor Brad, frenemy. Because there's some who didn't know you, but as soon as you started pastoring, Doc, when this pandemic is over with, man, maybe you can get me over. Your first year, year and a half at Sunrise, they just need to hear from Pastor Brown. There's plenty of time to bring someone else in. They need to hear from you. They need to get to know you, honor you, and respect you as the under shepherd.
Wow. I have nothing else to say today because this has been a great conversation. And then there's one more question, and then we're done. I asked Big Bro this question one day because we used to communicate on social media, and he stopped, and he told me why. But I want you to encourage us, Big Bro, about why it's important sometimes to remove, even if it's social media, even though it can be fun, but remove those outside distractions, whether it be from our personal life, our ministry, even our marriages, our homes. Remove those type of distractions out the way, and then we'll close. Talk to us about that.
It's all the above. Um, I got so consumed with it that I was spending more time with that than I was in preparation and in ministering to my people. And it also caused a major issue in my relationship with my wife. And so I had to prayerfully make a decision. Now, social media has its props. Yes, it's a way to get exposure. It's a way to get yourself known, but it can also be a way to destroy what God is building. And so I made a conscientious decision to step away from all of it. So the only social media um, that I'm around is our church has a Facebook page, community Facebook page, and we did that at the start of the pandemic. My daughter, she's the one who runs our church's uh, Twitter account. I don't have anything to do with the social media piece anymore. All I do is uh, the pastoral because I found that when I let that go, that's when God really began to take me to a whole nother place because my that was no longer a distraction. I would be studying and I said, oh, you know what? This is going to be pretty powerful Sunday. Well, why don't I go ahead and just put this in the atmosphere? Let me go ahead and tweet this out. And then when somebody responded to it, then and so after a while, it got to a point where that I was losing my thought because I was more consumed with trying to get out thoughts that was coming to me on social media than I was preparing to feed those whom God had given me charge of. And so I had to step back from that and reshift my focus. And so it's kind of like some folks are addicted to various things. Sometimes we can become so addicted to social media that we neglect those things that are most important, such as family, and and in my case, family, and nurturing and shepherding my flock. And so I had to make that choice, and it was the best choice I ever made because now I'm complete because I'm committed.
Yes, sir. Well, like I said, Big Bro, thank you once again. This has been a great conversation. I know plenty of people who've commented who have been blessed by this conversation. So I thank you for taking our time today to chat with me. I really appreciate it, and just your counsel, your care, your concern for us. And as Big Bro Richardson said, thank you for absolutely thank you for being transparent and really just being, and this is how he is all the time. When we talk, he's like this with me all the time. He's gonna be real. He's not gonna sugarcoat anything. So I definitely appreciate you today for being real with us. So also, before we get ready to close, tell the viewers about your church. Tell the viewers about where your church is located, service times. There may be somebody maybe watching who might know somebody in Columbus, Ohio. So talk to us about your church, and then we'll close.
Our church is located in the Wyland Park community. It's a small, low income urban community. We are about 2 blocks from the Ohio State University.
Oh
Um,
Lord.
the church has been in that location for uh, well over 70 years. Our service time right now, we are still not doing in-person worship. Right now, uh, as I'm building my health back up right now, what we're doing is we have a conference line where we do our midweek service. Now, watch this. I give them 30 minutes of our power on Wednesday nights, and many of them have said that's more effective than the hour that I was giving them before the pandemic. And we do our Sunday morning worship at 10 a.m. on the conference line as well right now. Uh, as time goes on and as I get better, then I will go back to doing the sermon through the website. But right now we do our worship service on Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Uh, 7:30 we're done. Sunday mornings 10 a.m. by 10:45 we're done with our Sunday morning worship. Um, and if you want to participate in our worship services, I encourage you to visit our church website. It's 7th Avenue Community Missionary Baptist Church of Columbus, Ohio. Um, and you can pull that up and it will tell you everything you need to know about our service time and the conference line number that you can dial in to listen. Um, and so that's what we're doing right now. And to God be the glory.
Amen. Well, once again, that's 7th Avenue. I got it right here. I'm gonna post it in the comments. Just make sure, big bro, just confirm it for me that I got it right, because I'm gonna post it right quick. Let's see. It should have came. Let me see if it come in. Is this the website?
That's it.
All right. So 7th Avenue Community Missionary Baptist Church, Columbus, Ohio. Like I said, Big Bro is a great preacher, great academician, scholar from Ohio Christian University. And once again, we thank you for taking our time today for talk with us. So you stay on. I'm gonna end this broadcast, but you stay on just for a couple quick minutes. All right.
Okay.
If that's all right. So once again, thank you. Please share this. Repost it, share it. We thank you once again for another great clergy conversation. God bless you and God keep you. Good